In this video, I would like us to talk about Laravel controllers. Laravel controllers are an intermediary that separates routes from the application logic. Controllers contain methods, or we can call them functions, that handle incoming requests. They process data and then return responses. Controllers are located in the app HTTP controllers directory. So if we are to check in our application, we will go to app and then HTTP. Then inside here is actually where we have controllers and where we can be able to create controllers. Controllers perform many broad functions which include and are not limited to handling HTTP requests, displaying views, processing data, contains the business logic that affects a particular part of an application. Controllers return responses and also interacts with other features of Laravel. For example, models, services, form requests, policies, and so on and so forth. And the last point is that controllers serve as a layer of separation of concerns. And in this case, we have mentioned it above. I would like us to talk about types of controllers. And in our previous video, we were loading our routes just by having them like this, returning inside our routing folder, and we were returning a view. We can also be able to return a view from a controller function. But before we talk about that, I will mention it as we speak about these types of controllers. And the first type of controller that I want us to talk about are single action controllers. These are controllers that handle only one complex action and is therefore made invocable. To create a single action controller, you can run the command php artisan make controller. Then the name of our controller, I would like to call it welcome controller. After that, then we can make it invocable. So you have ---- invocable. That when we hit enter, then a controller has been created here, which is called welcome controller. And I want us to look at how an invocable controller looks like. And as we are having inside here, you can see we only have one method, which is called public function invoke. And basically that is all we need. And then inside here, we can be able to put our complex logic. But in the event of whatever it is that we're talking about, since we are just doing the basic stuff, I want us to look at web.php. As you can see here, we are returning a view which is called welcome. And I would like to comment it out and then return this view inside our controller. So I am going to do that and then save and then go to our controller, the welcome controller. And inside here, I want us to say return view. And then in this case, welcome. And this view that we are calling welcome is the view that we did create inside resources, views, and the file that we call welcome.blade.php. So you just reference it as welcome, like that. And now if we are to check, we will have issues because we have not included it in our routing file. So for us to do that, we have to include our controller. So you have use app HTTP controllers, and then we call it welcome controller, like that. After that, now we can be able to have that route. So you say, let me push this. So route, and we can say get, and it is this route here. We just have a comma and then have our controller. So we can have here welcome controller full colon, double full colon class, like that, and then close it. Then I want us to try and see if we can still be able to have the welcome page, which is what we're having here. And you can see we still are able to have it. If you comment this out to just show that it is actually that which is loading our controller and try and refresh, then you have that you're having a 404. That means route not found. So whenever you have in your Laravel application an error that says route not found, similarly, it means that the route that you're working with is actually non-existent. So you might be able to check things around the routing. So that is an invocable controller, and in this case, we are saying the single action controller. I want us to talk about the second type of controllers in Laravel, which is resource controllers. And for me to be able to talk about resource controllers, we will actually end up creating a controller. But to explain, I just want you to think of a scenario where you have to manage users in your application. So you have the users table in your database, and in this case, you will need actions that you'll be able to create, read, update, and delete users. So you will find that you will need a method for deleting users, creating users, editing users, and so on and so forth. So basically, in this case, the best way in which you can be able to implement this is using a resource controller. I would like us to create a resource controller. We are going to use a similar command to whatever it is that we have. We are going to have PHP artisan make controller. And the name of the controller is, let me call it user controller. And then we are going to give a flag. So we can say -r or -resource. Whichever way you do it, it will create for you the resource controller. So I'm going to hit enter. And now we have another controller. And remember, the controllers, when they are created in app HTTP controllers directory. Now you can see we have user controller here. If we are to check inside here, we have many methods. We have the index method. We have the create method. And the index method is usually used to list the resource. So in this case, if you are listing the users, you will list all of them. And then after that, we have the create method. This one, you show the form for creating a user. After that, we have store. This will be the method that will be saving our user in the database. And then we have show. If you want to see a single user, you can be able to use that method. Then we have edit. This will show the edit form. And then update will show for us, will actually save for us the changes to a user data. For example, a user has changed the email, or maybe they have changed their phone number. You will be able to use this method to save the changes. And then we have the destroy method. In this case, this method is the one that we use to delete the records. So if it is in the case of a user controller, deleting a user record. So basically, that is an explanation of how you will be able to do that. And of course, if you are having a resource controller, you need to also do routing for this resource controller. And for routing of a resource controller is actually very simple. You will just say route resource like that. And then, since this resource controller is the one that is affecting users, so we can say users, that will be the link sort of that we will work with. But then in itself, it has several HTTP routing verbs that will be used. And we are going to check that in a short while. And then inside here, we can say user controller class. That, and we will close it with a semicolon, and that is just it. But of course, it's also required for us to import it here. So I'll just copy this one that we are having and just have user controller. So basically, that is it. Now I want us to check whether how many routes that are having the users verb that are displayed, or in other words, that are there in existence in our application. If we want to check the routes that exist in our application, we can run an artisan command to check that for us. And we can say PHP artisan route list, and it will list for us all the routes that exist. And now you can see, by us just having users in our welcome controller, we have several routes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 routes. We have users index, we have users store, we have users create, user show, user update, user destroy, and then user edit. So all these routes are created for us for the resource controller. We do not need to create each one to hit the single methods that exist. So basically, that is what we have. So let me just clear such that we return this tab a little bit down. I would like us to talk about other types of controllers. The third type of controllers are middleware controllers, and this one I do not want to talk about it now. We will talk about it sometime in future. I also wanted to talk about partial resource routes, and I will talk with regard to what we have here in the users controller class. Sometimes you may want to engage just a few of the routes. In this case, probably only index and the show method, or maybe index and create. You can attach a constraint here and say only, and then have an array of the routes, because you saw we were hitting all the methods that you have in the user controller. Now we can say we just want index, and maybe we want create, just those two methods. So if we are again to do PHP artisan route list, you will find that now the user's link, or in other words, the user's controller has only two methods that are being hit. We have index and we have create, not the 7 that we had initially. Another way in which we can be able to do, instead of using only, we can also use except. So in this case, if I attach instead of only except here, what it means is that now index and create will not be there, but all the other routes that exist under this resource controller will be in existence. So let us try and see. Again, PHP artisan route list. Now you can see we are having 5 of them. 2 of them are excluded. So basically, that is what happens. I would like us to talk about the next type of controllers, which we call API resource controllers. But in this case, we will just talk about API resource routes. API resource routes are routes that are consumed via API. In our routing directory, we need to have routing file for the API. We will create it by running the command. As you can see, what we are having here is we are having 2 routes, web, and this web is not for API. We usually have a special folder here which we call API inside our routes file. So for us to create it, we will run the command php artisan install :API, and this you install for us Laravel Sanctum and configure our Laravel application to be able to work as an API, and it will also create for us the API route file. So let me hit enter. It is asking us whether to do database migrations, and we can say yes. And now we have been able to install Laravel Sanctum, and we have also been able to create the personal access tokens table in our database. And Laravel Sanctum, you assist in authentication of an API via issuing of tokens. I do not want to talk about it so much. There are other videos maybe where we can be able to cover that. But for now, because whatever it is that you're dealing with is simple stuff, let us go ahead and see how we can be able to use now this API directory that we have here. So you can see it has one route which is getting the request user. That one I'm not going to use it. I would like us to just import our controller, the similar controller that we had, that is the user's controller. So we can say use app http controllers and then user controller. And now for us to be able to use this in resource as a resource controller, as an API resource controller, we will say route and then API resource. And then inside here, probably we can just have again users and then user controller class. And the difference between what we are having here and what we are having in web.php is that inside API, if we have API resource, then there are methods which are going to be excluded. The create method, which shows the form, we will not need to show the form. Now we will have to work with it in our, maybe if we are doing a front-end application, we'll be able to work with it now inside our front-end app. And then you can also have the edit method being excluded. And I would like us to just check that and verify. So I will comment out the user's resource in web.php and just leave the API resource and see how many methods you are going to have. And in this case, we are expecting to have 5 methods instead of 7. So here I'm going to say PHP artisan route list. And now you can see that the methods have reduced. So we are having 7 of them here. I mean 5 of them instead of 7. So basically that is what that does. Then of course we have this sanctum cookie route and so on and so forth. And I believe that is what we have when we are having the auth sanctum. So basically that is what happens. And that is about the API resource routes. I hope I've been able to try and explain a little bit better. Now I will want us to try and see how to access this API resource. And since the only method that we are not having is the users, is create and edit, I would like us to try and see how we can be able to access this resource. So we can be able to just do /users like that. And this, you hit the index method. And the reason why we are having not found is because there's nothing that is being returned here. So if I open the user controller and go to the index method, we can even just return something. We can say return 1, 2, 3 like that. And now if I am to refresh, I am checking the user's controller inside the web.php, the one that we have commented out. That is the reason why we are still having the 404 persisting. But if we want to check the API one, we will say API, and then we will say localhost 8000, and then /API, and then /users. And now you can see we are getting 1, 2, 3. And so that is how we can be able to test that. If we want to test that method still inside this other controller that we have, I want to remove the except, just have it like this, such that we are accessing all of them. If we want to access this via the web.php routing file, I do not need to add /API. I'll just do localhost users, and you can see still it is returning the same value. So you can be able to have an API and have some of the methods in the or the routes in the API also similar to the routes in web.php and still be able to work with your application. I would like us to stop here, but I will also want to mention that we have not talked about singleton controllers, and we have also not talked about nested controllers. This we can discuss at a later stage, hopefully. Thank you very much for following this tutorial video up until this point. Subscribe if you are new to this channel. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, and you can also share your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you very much.